For those of you that were around 9 years ago and even 23 years ago, you may remember anthrax. Anthrax was being spread around. Well, today we have more reports because over the past few days we have been getting reports from Wyoming that there is an outbreak of anthrax in the state. Now today I want to break down what's going on, why we need to be well aware of what is happening in the state of Wyoming. Also, what is potentially coming to other states as well. So I'm going to break all this down in just a moment, but all I ask is one thing. It takes 2 seconds. Go ahead, hit that like button if you enjoy these daily updates. And now, let's begin. So if you remember 9/11, you probably remember stories like this. Amerithrax or anthrax investigation. People were being sent anthrax through the mail, and that couldn't be stopped. Many people were being hurt because of it. Or, what about this one? This is from 9 years ago. It says, Pentagon anthrax blunder reveals chain of errors in government lab protocols. Where the government, the Pentagon, mistakenly sent anthrax to other labs. How crazy is that? Well, over the past couple days, we've been getting more reports, but it's different this time because now it has to do with cattle. Look at this. It says anthrax kills Wyoming moose, more than 50 cattle for first time in decades. But it goes on to say, no humans have been infected during the outbreak in south central Wyoming, though officials advise people to avoid dead animals with no obvious injuries. Okay, here's what we need to get to, because this is troubling. It could potentially spread to humans, right? Look at this. It says, anthrax outbreak kills dozens of cows as state warns of risk to humans. Now, what are they talking about here? How is this potentially a risk to humans? Well, that's what we need to discuss because there are different levels to anthrax exposure. Okay, let's read this together. It says anthrax is a zoonotic disease, and we are concerned about that. Anybody that thinks they have been exposed to a carcass of an animal that may have died of anthrax, whether it be a cow, horse, moose, or deer, they need to contact the Wyoming Department of Public Health or their medical provider as soon as possible. Why? Well, here's the reason why. Anthrax has different fatality rates depending on your exposure. For instance, if you inhale anthrax, you have a potentially 90% fatality rate if it's left untreated. Now, if it's an intestinal anthrax, which means you've ingested it, you've consumed it, like undercooked meat, for instance, of an animal that had anthrax, the mortality rate is between 25 and 60% if left untreated. And then injection of anthrax says death occurs in more than 25% of confirmed cases. Doesn't say anything about left untreated. So do not inject it, obviously. Now, what is intestinal anthrax? Because again, this is what most people would get if they consume cattle that does contain anthrax, was infected with it. It says intestinal anthrax infection results from eating undercooked meat from an infected animal. It can affect the gastrointestinal tract from your throat to your colon. It says intestinal anthrax is very rare. It begins with nausea, loss of appetite, vomiting, and fever. Obviously, none of those are great. Those symptoms are followed by abdominal pain, vomiting of blood, and severe diarrhea. Again, nothing you want. It says early antibiotic treatment is important if you have intestinal anthrax. Just so you know, the last time there was a detection of anthrax in a moose in Wyoming, in that state, was in 1956. Yeah, it's been decades. Now, here's the reason why experts are saying that this is a risk to humans. They say on January 1st, 2023, this is the last time we've gotten reports. It says we had about 89.3 million head of cattle. Okay, 89.3. That is about 3% lower than the 92.1 we had in 2022. In the state of Wyoming, as of January 1st, 2023, they had about 1.24 million cattle and calves, which is about 2% less than the previous year. Okay, so why is all this so important? Well, it's because anthrax, just saying the name, scares people. And if that scares people, they probably will not consume meat. Won't consume any type of beef that comes from cattle, obviously, right? They may not consume chicken, right? They may not consume fish, right? We just don't know. But here's the big concern. The concern is, how are people going to react? Number one, but are people going to do what's right by the cattle if they do not know what is causing them to be sick or die? That, again, we don't know. That is why the state wants to be very cautious. Now, I want to read this to you, okay? Look right here. It says, ranchers who are concerned about their herds catching the disease are encouraged to contact their veterinarians about getting the anthrax vaccine. Yes, there is a vaccine. Here's the other thing. I've reached out to a few friends of mine, some of which do have ranches. They are concerned about this. They do know what's happening. None of them are from Wyoming, but they are still concerned. Their concern right now is making sure the American people are educated. And so I want to educate you on something really quick. If a herd does become infected with anthrax, is it safe to consume that herd or some from that herd if they have been infected or potentially infected? The answer, according to these reports, is yes. You can actually go, and if an animal was infected, they can get the vaccine, they can get the antibiotics, whatever they need. They can be treated, and the meat does not have to be thrown away and disposed of. You can actually consume it as long as you cook the meat properly. Okay, do not eat it extremely rare. Cook the meat properly, and you will be fine, according to experts. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm not a worldwide renowned chef. Okay, I'm not any of those things. I'm just here to tell you what I'm seeing. Now, I do want to read you this last thing though. It says those infected start to experience symptoms between 1 and 7 days after exposure, which vary depending on how they were infected. For those infected in the skin, the disease first causes raised bumps to appear before a characteristic black eschar emerges. But in patients who have caught the disease via the air, they may have flu-like illness for 2 or 3 days, which then disappears before the individual suddenly starts struggling to breathe. To treat the infection, doctors tend to use antibiotics to kill the bacteria as well as keep patients in the intensive care unit. Okay. Now, where do we go from here? Well, here's what I can tell you. There's a risk of an anthrax outbreak in the U.S. Already we're seeing it, but it's localized to the state of Wyoming, pretty much right in the central area. Now, this could easily spread because cattle can spread it to one another. That's the concern. It's also, according to reports, it's coming from the ground because of the weather. So this is something that we need to be well aware of, and I promise I will keep you up to date on everything that's going on. As of right now, that is all we know. They're just saying to be aware, to make sure you cook your meat, and that there's no global threat of anthrax. It's not like 9/11. It's not like back in 2015. We should all be fine. But there's still risks to human beings. So I will leave you with that. Again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.